together for you, particularly some of the learnings that we've been gaining over the last 12 months. It seems crazy to say 12 months, but it is basically. And put them together so that we can finish off with two of the very incredibly important competencies every leader should have: the ability to coach and the ability to give effective feedback to people. So when we're going through the session today, just a few things in the session. Sorry, just working out. Here we are. I think we're getting there. I'm just going to work through the slides, and if you today want to have a chat with me at all, please do, because we're making it possible. Chelsea's in the background, she's going to be listening. So if you look at this particular slide, you'll see that you've got the option for putting your microphone on. But if that's too difficult for you, don't worry, Chelsea's going to be able to do that for you so that we can make sure that you get the opportunity to be heard at any point in time. Some of the material I'm covering today, you may want to have a discussion about, particularly with the feedback and the situations for the feedback. It's a very simple tool that I'm showing you today, but it takes a lot of practice to get it right. So a big portion of being able to be an effective leader and a good coach is to be able to give feedback to your people, because that's the way we get great performance out of them. And I want you to think of it a bit like this. If you look at this photo, you've got the mother bird who is feeding her babies. She's feeding them because she's giving them the opportunity to grow and to nurture them and to make them strong so that they can become independent and leave the nest. That's what we're aiming to do with our people. Not that we want them to leave the nest, particularly if we do a good job and they become brilliant, but it is around that notion that we want to nurture them. And if they do leave us, that means that we've done a great job of being able to get them and build up their skills. And fundamentally, what we find in businesses, when someone has a really good leader, a really empowering leader, and a leader that gives them that opportunity to grow so that they can perform, they often come back anyway. It's like parents with their kids that never leave home, similar sort of situation. In today's session, what I'd like to cover off with you is the fact that feedback and coaching itself can be quite challenging. You need to have a lot of moral courage to be able to do it in the first place, and I'll give you some tips on that. It needs to be very authentic, and we need to know that we've got the confidence to be able to do it. That's why I'm showing you some very simple tools and very simple techniques to be able to use, because once you get used to this process, it's incredibly powerful. It gives you an enormous amount of confidence, and it gives your people incredible confidence in you. And that's what we want as a leader. We're going to also look at the feedback process and learn how to apply that. Feedback is equally important with the coaching process, and it needs to be constant. It's not something we do occasionally. It's not something that we save up until there's a catastrophe or an end-of-year event or something like that. It needs to be almost like a drip feed so that it's constant. When we create a culture where there is an acceptance and willingness to provide and receive feedback, we've created a culture of productivity and a very solid foundation for any business to thrive. And we looked at earlier in some of our earlier sessions about performance and engagement. We get that engagement, and that's what this is all about today. We will get the performance. We're also going to look at the skills required to be a good coach, and I'll show you the model for working through the coaching process. It's easy to ignore it, and I think I'll just flag that at the beginning, because we think we're going down that road, we think we might be doing it, but we tend not to follow the process. I'll look at that coaching process in detail to show you the various stages and why they're so important, and then how we apply that to real work situations. Going back to the standard slide that we've had many, many times, it's around this creating the conditions for success. And as those conditions for success finish up with the coaching and the feedback. And what we do by communicating more effectively with our people, we do change the behaviour and the attitude. So these are the two areas today that we will be focusing on in great detail, terribly important ones. From the last two sessions, I also wanted to just do a recap around our team member. When we talked about our team member style, I'm not talking about the personality profiles that we have been covering in the workshops. I'm talking about their level of competence and their level of confidence. So when we're talking about how much their skill and their will is developed in a situation. To recap, we need to direct, we need to be very direct, and we need to give constant feedback and training to somebody who has low skill, low will. Because these people may be motivated to be in your business, they're excited to be there, but their capability is low and their confidence to do something on their own is not there. So we need to allow them to learn and to grow into their role and learn how to do the tasks that we assign to them. Then if we look, still keeping down low on the skill level, but higher on the enthusiasm or the will level, we've got the coaching. And yes, we need to coach. These people might have some skill, but they need guidance, and the guidance is important. So it's a combination of the two. It's a combination of the feedback and the coaching. When we increase that skill level, but we may still have not got that great confidence level, it's around the support that they need. They need to know that it's okay for them to voice their opinion, to put their suggestions together, and to have a go with you backing them 100% behind them the whole way. That's terribly important for them. And when we get to delegate, look, they've got the capability, they've got the confidence to do it. We need to allow them to be able to do it. We need to realise that they've got that confidence and that confidence and let them do what they do well. Because when people do what they do well, they become very engaged. The next one, and to sum that up, is to say that we've got the high dependency, that's our low skill, low will. They're dependent on you, they're dependent on other people in the organisation to help them through. We've got the enthusiastic, they might really want to do things well, may not have the skill to do it. They may want to impress you, but they may not have the skill to be able to do things effectively and make repeated mistakes. Interestingly, this morning, I had an email from a client of mine saying she's frustrated with one of her people. She's highly enthusiastic. She's really got the will there, but what I had to point out was that her skill is still not at the level that she's expecting it to be. She's a newbie to the business, so she hasn't been there for very long, only about a month and a half. So I had to remind her manager that skill is still not developed. We make assumptions that once we, get people in the organisation, they should pick things up quite quickly. It takes about 3 months for somebody to start to be truly productive. So we need to be cognizant of that as well. Then we go to our capable but cautious. This is generally where somebody feels as though they don't want to let you down and they don't want to do the wrong thing, or they've got high expectations of themselves, so they don't want to fail. So they bring in this cautious piece, and that starts to overwhelm them so that they're not free enough to be able to go forth and start doing what they do well. And then we've got the self-reliant achiever, which is where we delegate. So again, remembering that we've got these stages and we need to be able to assess them. That requires us having interactions, frequent interactions. It requires us watching what's going in the workplace and the feedback, two-way feedback. They give you feedback, you give them feedback. When we talk about feedback to me is equal to performance. You give good quality feedback, you'll get the performance. Poor quality feedback, you will not get the results and you will not get the performance that you're looking for. Now, to do this, I'll take myself off the video for a while and we'll just work through each one of these different sections. So the first one that I'm going to look at is the impact of feedback on performance. And when it comes up in this slide, you will see that quality absolutely does impact performance. If you give ineffective feedback, you will get stagnation. If it's very poor quality feedback, you'll get very low performance. And again, this correlates with some of the previous slides that we've been looking at. I don't really know why this slide is here. Let's see if I can move that. Can't move that. If we've got high quality feedback, but somebody is a low performer, like they still don't have that skill, they feel supported. Now, if somebody feels supported, then they will give it a go. So we need to support people. If we've got somebody who's a high performer, which is in the top left quadrant, but we don't give them good quality feedback, or we don't give them feedback, they feel undervalued, taken for granted, and then they stop trying. And that's an important thing to remember. This is the danger zone, really big danger zone. There are a lot of people in a lot of organisations that live in this quadrant. But if we can have those high performers getting really good quality feedback, that's where we get continuous improvement. And with that, you can gain and achieve anything. I wonder if anybody could, at this point in time, tell me, by typing quickly, there are 4 types of feedback. What do you think they are? Anyone, anywhere? And if you want to speak, please just let me know as well. But anyone got an idea if there were 4 types of feedback? Perfect, Lee, thank you. We've got constructive and positive. That's 2. There's 2 more. What do you think they are? Anyone? Have a go. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. Destructive and negative. Good, Amanda, thank you. Negative is destructive. They equal the same. So it's very interesting. Constructive and positive are 2 very different ones. Yes, negative is the 3rd one. Destructive equals negative. There is a 4th one. It's the most common form of feedback that we get in an organisation. Any guesses? You're all thinking, and the answer is exactly what you've given me right now. None. It's the most common form of feedback we get in all organisations. It's the big problem. People don't seem to get enough feedback or any feedback. That's where suddenly there's a problem and people say, I didn't know about it. Nobody told me. I didn't know what was going on. This is why feedback is so important. So what we're going to look at is constructive, positive, and negative, and the no feedback at all. My line in the sand at this point in time is to say there is absolutely never any room in an organisation to have negative feedback or no feedback. And I'll show you the reasons why for that as we're working through the materials. Because if we give ineffective feedback, and this is the equivalent of negative feedback, it is destructive. It's totally destructive. It focuses on blame. It's finger pointing. It's belittles people. It accuses people. It lacks anything specific as far as facts are concerned, and it focuses on the person, so it becomes personal. And by examples of negative feedback, I'll give you a simple example. Someone might say, for example, you did a terrible job dealing with that customer on the phone just then. Now, if you think about it, that's an attack on the person. You did a terrible job with that customer on the phone just then. It's finger pointing, it's blaming, it's belittling them. But what have they done? What did they do? What can they do with that? Because this is the thing. When we give feedback, someone has to be able to do something with it. So as soon as you do something like that, there's nowhere to go. Never, ever, ever be surprised if the first thing that they ever do to you is they become defensive. And then you've got conflict, and then you've got the problems on your hand. So when we go and attack the person, it's not going to work. We need to look at the facts. We need to look at what's provable and strip away any form of judgment. Very hard to do, but again, I will show you how to do that. And it doesn't improve competence. That person will walk away going, well, I've got no idea what you're talking about. I thought I did well. I gave it a go, and all you can do is tell me I'm no good at it. That then erodes their self-confidence, which is not what we want to do, because that creates a culture where people will not try anything and will not want to improve. It also creates confusion because their idea of a good job and your idea of a good job are obviously vastly different. So that there's lack of clarification there. And the person feels really unfairly judged when we give them ineffective feedback. But if we use positive feedback and constructive feedback, that's where we can acknowledge the other person's feelings, we focus on the facts, we get improvement, and it's learning oriented, and that's what's most important. This way that we will be able to create trust, and it allows people to start a dialogue with you, a two-way dialogue, and that's what feedback is. It should never be just one way. When we tell people that they need to improve stuff, if we don't get this combination right, then it's only ever going to be one way, us telling them what's going on. So I'm going to try and change your mindset today to show you a different way of doing this, because the person will be able to generate their own solutions through effective questioning, and that will increase their competence. We also increase their self-confidence and their self-esteem because you've taken the time and you've genuinely shown that you have an interest in them and in helping them do better. It creates clarity of the expectations between the two of us, and it also helps that person feel as though you genuinely are supporting them. The model that I'm going to show you to do this is called the EACH model. Now, the EACH model is something that I developed a couple of years ago, and I use this in all my sessions. It's a very simple model, very, very simple model. There is an art to it, and I want to warn you about the art in this. So the first section is called the example. That's the E. When we want to give somebody feedback, it might be, again, let's go back to the customer service situation that when someone was talking on the phone and they didn't do a good job. What we need to do is be very specific with what was actually said or done, and avoid any emotive or accusatory or judgmental language in that. For example, you might not have liked the way that they talked to the customer, but if you said, when you were speaking with Joe Bloggs on the phone, you were very short in your responses without clarification of what was important or seeking clarification of what was important to the customer. So we need to stop there, and that's why I took the breath. We stop. So we need to have specific things that you heard them say or things that you've seen them do. So it's that one or the other or both. So you were abrupt. You told them not to bother you. You then slammed down the phone. That's what I mean. And that's it, and it stops there. You don't say, because our temptation then, when we're starting to use this model, is to then go in and add on. And we say, that's not good enough. You know that we've gone through this before. I've told you many times this is the way that you answer the phone. You should know better by now. As soon as you've done that, as soon as you add on that extra bit, your judgment, your add-on bits, you should know better, you've started to attack the person. So you have to remove that, because that's going to get defensive. You've thrown in a judgment, and they'll just look at you and they will just stop talking. They won't say anything, they won't contribute, because you've gone too far. You have to be very, very short, sharp, simple on what they've actually said or what they've actually done. Then you need to ask them a question. So you don't add any other bits in. Don't ever say you should know better. The next thing that follows in is the ask the question. And when we ask the question, it's around, how do you think that impacts on the customer? Or you've got to use your language. It's the same thing. How did that affect the customer? What do you think? How do you think the customer felt? And it's not a closed-ended question. It must be open. A who, what, when, where, why, or a how question. It cannot be closed. Not did, could, shouldn't you, can you, will you. It can't be those sorts of questions. It's got to be open questions. So how do you think that impacted the customer? What message was that sending to the customer? As your manager, how do you think I felt listening to that conversation? And then you stop, and then you stop. How do you think the other team members in the business felt when they saw you react that way? So you stop. You don't do anything. You then must allow them to respond to you. It's hard. It's a hard way to get used to it, but we have to back off and let them answer. And if you're listening to the sounds of silence, just be aware that they're trying to encourage you to answer the question for them, because they're probably used to you telling them the answer anyway. We have to stop. At some point in time, we have to stop and allow them to give us the answer. That's critically important at this point in time. And when they start to give you an answer, that's when we ask further questions if need be. But you don't then go in on top of them and add in what you want to say. So if you said, okay, yep, the customer was very upset and hung up very quickly and they're not going to take the order. So you don't, that's what they've just said to you. You don't then go in and say to them, well, that's not good enough, is it? Stop. You then have to say, ask them another question. Anything that you want to say to them, convert it into a question. For example, what should we have done? How could the customer have got a better response from you? What's our process? Help me understand what just happened then. That's probably one of the best phrases that you can come out with. Help me understand what just happened. And get them to tell you, but you've got to let them tell you what goes on, because it's not until they say what they've done wrong that they will own it. If you tell them what they've done wrong, you still own it. Think about it this way. If you've got kids and you want them to clean up their room, you can ask them until you're black and blue in the face to clean up their room, but it's you that's got the problem. It's not them. So you need to be able to make them own it. And they will only own it if they say it. And we can only do that by asking them a question. So if you've got particular examples in your workplace, what I would recommend that you would do is write them down for me. And at some point, what we can do, we can do this via email or by phone afterwards, because it's very hard me just giving you a one-way example. It's much better if I've got people talking to me, because I can then show you step by step how this works. But fundamentally, when we've got it out of them, what happened, they've just told you what happened, we then have to say, well, what do we need to change about this? The way we phrase that is also incredibly important, very important. When I'm talking about that, what I'm talking about is saying that, what do we need to change? Because if you say, what do you need to change, or what have you got to do better, that becomes adversarial. We need to make it an us thing. It shows that as the manager, I'm still part of this. I'm still taking a role in this process with you. I'm not leaving you out to hang to dry on your own. So what do we need to do to fix this? What do we need to do differently next time? What could we do to make this better? And then you get their ideas, and you keep asking them until they come up with a reasonable list of things that you think would be able to improve the situation. If they're defensive, the reason you'll find that they're going to be defensive immediately is because you've told them. And that's what it does. It immediately does. If you think you've done this extremely well and they've come back and they've been really defensive, that's where you each them within the each. And by that, what I mean is, hang on a minute, I think something's just gone really wrong. What just happened there? You've gone straight back to the ask. So I just asked a simple question. What just happened there? I seriously want to understand from your point of view what's going on, because you'll find, generally speaking, what you've done is somehow you've thrown in a few judgmental words, and you've probably added a little bit more information, and they're thinking, oh God, I'm in trouble. So what happens is they close down or they become defensive. So it's very neutral language that we have to use, and that's why sticking to what was actually said, verbatim what they said, word for word what they said, or what they did, that's the critical part, and it's where everybody tends to get this model wrong. Once you've done this, and you've also got to be in a calm process yourself, by asking neutral questions and continue. It's not an interrogation. It's not meant to be an interrogation. It's about keeping quiet and letting them having time to think and respond to you. In this process, when we're doing this process, I have had many experiences with lots of different characters who have gone off and they've said, oh, this always happens, and you never say this to Mary, and it's only ever me you pick on, and why is it always me? That's a defense mechanism. They're trying to divert you. So you acknowledge, okay, I hear what you're saying about Mary, but at the moment, I'm only interested in this particular situation. So don't make it more volatile by saying, oh, well, that's ridiculous. Don't talk about Mary, or that's got nothing to do with this. Always acknowledge, but just say, we could address that later perhaps, but at the moment, I want to address this issue. We need to be talking about this. And you draw them back into it again, because they will try any way they can once they've realised. And one of the other reasons why they'll become defensive in some situations is because they know they've been caught out. They know that they've done the wrong thing. And it's like, oh, I'm actually going to have to say what I've done. By doing that, I've admitted I've done the wrong thing. So it's patience, people. You've got to be patient with this model. I've had people who have started to cry. And in all honesty, very sympathetically, I'll give them some tissues and say, would you like a cup of water or a cup of tea? And it's often quite good to take them to the kitchen and get a cup of tea at that point in time if they're really are upset, because it diffuses that tension, but you don't let it go. And I don't let it go. And I say, but we are going to have this conversation because it is very important, and I do need to hear from you what's happening. So it's being persistent, it's being calm, and it's being consistent. We need to follow it through. If they deny that they've done it, it tells me that you've probably used third-party feedback or third-party evidence. There's a danger there, because if you didn't see it, why are you giving them feedback on it? You need to know what they've done. You need to have proof of what they've done or what they've said. So if you've seen it and they're trying to deny it, you can say, but I saw you call Sue a bloody idiot. I heard you say to Sue that she was a bloody idiot. So if they're denying it, they can't really deny it again once you've said, I heard you say to Sue, or I saw you do whatever you saw, whatever it was. If it's third party, you're in problems there. That's a he said, she said, and that's going to be difficult. So it's got to be evidence. And that's what I mean by evidence in that example. Has to be specific, what was actually said, what was actually done, so that you know. If they think that they haven't spoken in an abrupt way or a rude manner, if they're trying to live with denial on that one, it's like playing a game of tennis. You've got to hit the tennis ball back over the net and say to them, if I spoke to you, if you asked me for help and I said to you, no, go away, I'm too busy, how would that leave you feeling? Another one too, they'll say, oh, I don't know, you're the manager, you tell me. That's another defense mechanism, because they will try and put up any sort of block that they can. The response is simply going to be, all right, imagine for a moment you were the manager. What would happen then? If somebody did that to you, how would you feel? So I've got my views, but I don't know. How would you feel? I don't know how you feel. You tell me. What would be the impact on you? So they will try all sorts of games with you. And that's why you need to have that evidence. And that's why you need to have the specific examples to use. I'm just trying to think of other examples I can show you. If I think of them as I'm going along, I'll definitely share them with you, but because there's a multitude of them. It may be very well a really good idea if you've got a situation where you've got someone that's doing that. Please write me a detailed description of the process, because I'll be able to point it out pretty quickly where things derail, because this is a very pure model. It needs to be followed step by step as is outlaid here, because it pares it down and it stops all the additional peripheral stuff, which is assumptions, inferences, other people putting their 2 bobs worth in, or judgment calls and additional information that shouldn't be there. We pare it down and we address just the issue at hand. Now, if there are a number of things that they've done, you have to do them one at a time. You literally do, because if you just want to do the whole lot at one time, it will be overwhelming and you won't get through it. I'll guarantee you won't get through it. Pick the one that's the big priority, address it. Get that one done first, because as soon as you get them to tell you what we need to change here, that's when you'll start to get traction with this model, and it becomes more and more efficient. And it will end up at a time when you learn how to do this. In my experience with people that have gone through this process, they've often said they only ever get to the example and then they get to the question, and then people go, oh, I know I've done wrong, I know I've done wrong, and they'll admit it. Don't be fooled. That's another defense mechanism. And you say, well, maybe you have, but let's go through the process anyway. And you follow it through, because it's making people take ownership of what they have done. As soon as you tell them what they've done, you've lost. Walk away, give up, you've lost. It's not going to work. Oh, I do apologise about that. I'll turn that off. The other thing is, at the end of this, once we've worked out what we need to change, there is the help piece, and the help piece is equally important. I'm so sorry. I'll throw that away. With the help part, what help is needed for them to achieve the desired outcome? When I'm talking about that, it may be particularly a skill that they don't actually have. So we need to be aware, do they have this skill or don't they have this skill? It may require some coaching from you, which is where we're leading into. It may require some on-the-job training. It may require for you to support them or be with them when they go through this process the next time. So we need to know, it's almost like saying, okay, we've gone through this process, you've admitted you've done something that isn't up to standard or is wrong or is unacceptable. We've looked at ways to change that, but I'm not going to throw you off on your own. I'm going to be there to support you to make sure that this doesn't happen again, that we can go and move forward. This is what true performance management is all about. It's about saying, okay, we've got a situation. How do we get you to take ownership of that? And how do we move forward to make sure that we improve? Because these improvements, you can turn someone around that's been quite an underperformer and turn them into a high performer using this model. The reason I know, I've done it, and I've done it on many instances with people that I've had working for me. And it's magic once you get the combination right, but it does take persistence. Now, the other thing that I wanted to cover with you, I'll park that one just for a time being because we'll probably revisit if we've got time. But the next one I wanted to show you was the ETCH model. And we use this when we're giving positive feedback to somebody, because by saying to somebody, great job, sensational, really loved what you did, it doesn't give them any kind of idea of what they've done. It's exactly the same model, except we tell them this time. So it's only ever used for when we're giving positive feedback. That's where this one has its beauty. So we say something like, for the example, in the presentation that you made to the client about the new products that we have, very specific, what was said or done, You tell them you got them engaged, you had them eating, you had them eating out of your hand. They were nodding, they were agreeing with what you were saying, they were impressed with the way that you were presenting the product, and we got lots of great feedback from them, and they're going to buy some of this product, for example. It's been, you know, it shows how credible you are as one of our top people. It's a great reflection on the team, and as a manager, I'm really proud of you. Now, something as simple as that really boosts somebody. It's beautiful feedback to get. And then we say to them how to continue. I'd love to see you do more of this. I would love to see you step up and take the lead in this kind of process, something like that, so that you're really reinforcing that you're impressed with them, that they've done a great job, and that this is what we want to have as our benchmark for our performance in our business. It really helps me as your manager. It takes the load off me. That's the help piece. It's got a great effect on the rest of the team. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Now, if somebody gets feedback like that, they're not going to be negative about it. They're not going to be upset about it. They're not going to be depressed about it. They're going to be incredibly chuffed. But we've given them reason why we're so impressed with them. And that gives them a whole package. It's like you buy somebody a present and then you don't gift wrap it or put a card with it. Let's gift wrap it. Let's put a bow on it. Let's put a card with it and give it to them, because it is a gift. And it's one that's always received amazingly well by people. So with constructive feedback, always use the each process. Make sure it's face-to-face, and it must be in private. And that's another reason why people will get defensive or try to avoid receiving that feedback, particularly if they know that other people can hear what's going on. Get yourself out of the room, get yourself out of the building if you need to with them, but do it in private, because it needs to be just one-on-one. Also, again, it's that timeliness. It's tough, I know. It's really tough to be able to be timely the whole time. Here's the thing. If you don't do it in the first 24 hours, don't do it. Don't bring it up 3 months later either. You have to do it within the first 24 hours. It's like puppy training. Sorry, it is. It's like training a child to go to the toilet. You have to do it in a timely manner. You have to make the time to give them that feedback in a timely manner. Same thing with positive feedback as well, with the ETCH model. It's got to be in a timely manner, because if it's left for 3 months, just don't bother, because they're going to say, well, you don't care. And that's exactly the message that's going through there with positive feedback. With constructive feedback, if you don't give it to them in a timely manner, all you're doing is you're saying, I'm reinforcing your bad behaviour, because they're going to say, oh, well, I got away with that. And that's the mindset that they'll go into the conversation with. So if we get onto it early, then they don't have time to create that mindset. Use the non-emotive language, terribly important. It's got to be non-emotive at all times. Emphasize the behaviour, not the individual. Don't attack the individual. They are going to be defensive. They will go into denial, and they will make life really difficult for you. But if you are hard on the facts and soft on the person, you get a completely different outcome. It's tough, but that's the general rule with this one. And it ends up with people learning, and they develop, and it's continuous improvement, and that's what we're going to get with this type of feedback. So the difference between directing and coaching. Now, this is the teaching rather than the coaching bit. I'm kind of transitioning from the feedback into the coaching model. If we look at our people on our scale, in our quadrants, where we've got people in the directing mode, yeah, this is the traditional management, the teacher style is still important, because they don't have the skill or the will to be able to do the job. So we need to use this approach with it, which is, I am, as your manager, I am responsible, and I will solve the problem, and I will coordinate, and I will control, and I will have all the answers. I have to, because they don't know. They don't have the skill, and they don't have the competence or the knowledge to be able to do it. If they're very new at this, We need to train them. We need to show them the safety. We've got to give them safe hands to work in. So the team member will feel dependent, defensive, I'm going to talk about in a second, and passive, and they'll avoid risk when they're learning. So this is only relevant for the bottom left-hand quadrant of that model that I've shown you, because they are new. If I do this when somebody needs support, or they need coaching, or they need delegating, and I use this approach on them, then they're going to say, not my problem, all yours. You're responsible, I'm not responsible. All care, no accountability lives here. You're a controller, you're a control freak, fine, you do it. You do it your way, I give up. You've got the answers, they won't give you the answers because they're used to you just always giving them the answers. They're training you to give them the answers. So they do become dependent on you to do anything, and they won't do anything without you in the room. They will become defensive, and then they become very passive and avoid risk because I think you're a control freak and you don't let them learn anyway. So again, I've said it 1,000 times, only that one quadrant do I become the traditional and teacher. Everything else, I need to lead as a coach. I need to be a leader and a coach. Because in this one, we've got dual ownership, we've got dual responsibility, we solve problems together, I can provide you with access to the information, and I want you to go away, think about it and work it out. I'll support you to find your own answers because you've got it. You've seen it, you've been here, you've done it, fine. So let's work through this together. And that makes the team members feel they've got ownership of their career, of their job, of their actions, and they take accountability. They feel empowered, and that's where we get proactivity, and they start to take the initiative rather than waiting for what's got to be told, what you telling them what to do. One thing about this, it's really important to remember that if I'm going to coach someone, it is very old. You've seen this before, you've heard it before, I'm sure. If you constantly tell them what they've got to do, and you're constantly creating an environment where they're dependent on you, you walk out that door, nothing happens because they don't know how to do anything without you being around. So that's, you give a man a fish, you feed him only for a day, and he will never want to go that step further. But if I coach them, if I teach that man how to fish by coaching, I'll feed him for life. And one thing that's really important to remember is you've got people that have got lots of skill, capability, lots of input to provide. Let's get it from them. Let's learn. Let's get that out of them and learn. Let them learn, and I might even learn with them. If I need to provide all of the answers, if I have to show them every time, if I have to tell them every time, if I'm constantly telling them, you're going to end up with a really, really hairy back. And that's not what you want, because you will end up with all of them riding on your shirt tails saying, you're the boss, you're the manager, you do everything, that I'm just going to be the follower. So it's called the monkey on your back, and it's an old analogy, but it's terribly, terribly true. If you keep taking on people's problems, don't be surprised that they're yours for life. So we have to shift that back to who owns the problem. But as soon as I start telling them in a judgmental tone, that's what I'm doing. I'm putting that monkey back on my back again. So we need to be aware of that. It's an easy trap to fall into. So what have we got to do? If we're going to become a good coach, there are some key skills. One of them is self-management, and I'll go into that in more detail. The big thing is to assess the skill and the will. And you need to really start thinking about, do I just make a blanket call on that the whole time? Because they might be doing one job and they might be highly skilled and have the will to do it. Then they might have a different job within still the same framework, but they will be less competent or maybe less confident. So really you need to assess the situation very, very carefully. Where is that level of skill and where is the level of will? And we need to build trust, but we can only build trust by being consistent. And again, I'll look at that in a bit of a deeper version as well. Asking good quality questions. Questioning technique is terribly important. And most of all, it's about listening. And I think all of you have probably come through that session with me where we've talked about listening and our listening capability, and that little test where we tend to lose 85% of the information that we hear from people. Listening is critical. It's a critical skill. You can learn it. You can train yourself to do it, but it's about being attentive. It's about switching off and focusing on the situation at hand. That comes in line with the self-management piece. And the constructive feedback, how do I use my EACH model? Am I effective at using that EACH process or not? And if I'm not, then I need to think about how I've got to improve that skill. It's a lot to do with practice. Again, I've always said I'm going to be there to support you. So please, if you do have any questions, just come to me and I can help you with those. Now, managing yourself. It means your physical state. Where's your level of energy? Where's your level of comfort? And are you ready? One thing I have to warn a lot of people who start out doing this for the first time, there's a level of anxiety. Will I get this right? Will I get this wrong? The first few times you do this, it's tough, yes. It's challenging, yes. You may have your heart in your mouth pumping wildly, yes. But when you get used to it, it's like anything. The better you become at it, the more you use it, the more you practice the skill, the more relaxed you will be. And when you're comfortable and when you're relaxed, you'll make the other person realise that you're competent and you've got the will and the skill to be able to do it as well. So you need to be ready. If you haven't prepared, don't go into the EACH process. Don't go into the coaching process. Just don't do it, because it will go wrong. We need to devote our time to this and make time for our people to be able to do it well. Your mental state is also very important. If you're so angry that you can't even speak, not a good idea to go into a coaching session or a feedback session at that point in time. We need to take a chill period. It might be go and get a cup of coffee, or it might be, there might be a lot of emotion behind this, yes. But we also need to realise that we need to be in a positive mental frame as far as I'm ready to do this and I can do this. I'm focused and I'm going to get rid of all of the other distractions. I'm taking time out. This is what I'm going to concentrate on. And be self-aware. By that one, it's basically, do you look like you're ready? Do you have that notion that you're going in there guns blazing, the look on your face, or are you ready to have a sensible, neutral conversation? Because if you go in with a heightened level of anxiety and your language and your body language is showing that, don't be surprised if they come in and go over the top of you, and then we've got this going on. So it just escalates. So we've got to try and prepare ourselves as best as we can to do that. Very important to get it to start the right way. The other thing too about building trust was being reliable and consistent. People are always looking at us as a leader. They're always looking at us for our consistency. And as soon as we are inconsistent, and that's not just with them, it's with everybody in the business, that's when they'll bring in, well, you never do it to Joe Blogs, you never do it to Mary, you never do it to Peter, why just me? They may have a valid point here, but we need to focus on them, and we need to be consistent with them, and we need to be consistent with what we're doing across the board. Being credible, so we've got the right skills, we've learnt this process, and we're going to use the process. Honouring confidentiality, very important. It's showing respect that we might have a tough conversation behind closed doors, that's where it stays. Preparing for your session and being ready to have that session. Being respectful and interested in the actual person is equally important, as is taking your responsibility as a coach very, very seriously. Being a coach can make or break somebody. So we want to make them. We don't want to break people. We want to, if they're not performing, we want to turn them around, and that's making them. So that's the intention, the mindset from when we begin is very important. And making a decision to be available to who you're coaching in that session and not allowing yourself to be interrupted. Giving time to your staff, undivided attention, and giving them constant feedback as far as possible, not favouring individuals. It does send a strong message when somebody's constantly being told how great they are and nobody else is. So we need to think about that in the converse as well. The other thing is, when we're preparing to start to this coach, is a step to use this thing called the GROW model. The first step, plan and prepare, plan and prepare, plan and prepare. You need to be totally prepared to go into the session. What do you want to achieve out of it? Have you got all your facts together? What development level is that person at? What's their personality style? When did this happen? Where did it happen? Where will it happen? And how much time is it going to take me to have this session with them? Then we go into the GROW model, which is the goal for G, R for reality, O for options, and W for L. The GROW coaching model is a very widely accepted model used around the world. It's terrific. It works extremely well. Most people don't know how to use it at all. At all. The reason being, we've got a goal, we go in, we start with a rapport. Rapport is always important. Rather than sitting someone down and saying, we're going to have a meeting today, I've got an issue with you. Straight away, you're going to get defensive. It might be around the fact that, okay, there was a situation yesterday I'd like to have a chat with you about, or I want to have a catch up with you. We haven't spoken for a while. I thought it'd be a good idea to sit down and see where you're at, where I'm at, and what we're doing. Think about the words. Think about how you're going to start that conversation. If you say, I've got an issue with you, I've got a problem with you, you've started already trying to put somebody into that defensive mode, and they will. But if you talk about, we had a situation and I'd like to discuss it to get your point of view, that eliminates a lot of the defensiveness straight away. Establish that rapport, get the clarity around why we're having the meeting, make it simple, make it clear to them. And what we're trying to achieve, and that might be a better understanding that both of us have of what's going on. That's the WIFM. What am I as your manager going to get out of it? An understanding of what happened and your perspective. What are you going to get out of it? An opportunity to explain to me what's been going on, what's happening, and that we can both be on the same page. And then that way we can work better together. So we're both going to get a positive out of this. The reality is to assess the current situation. What I would find in probably 98% of cases, which is a big figure, 98% of cases when I do this session in a training session, people will do the goal reasonably well, and then they go straight into options. They always skip the reality bit. They think they're doing it, but they're not. They're going straight into options. So it starts off usually like, so, okay, yesterday, let's talk about that presentation, what happened in the session, and then they start to talk, and that's as far as it gets, and then you go straight into the reality, into the options. Well, what are you going to do differently next time? Don't be tempted to skip this whole session here. We need to get a really clear understanding. What have you tried? How did that work for you? What else have you tried? How did that work with you? What was the impact? What was the outcome? What else has been tried? Where else have you tried that? What was the result there? So we really need to get what else has been happening. And you can only do that by asking good questions. And you probably do have to take notes, particularly when you're doing this for the first time. So we want to know what's happened and why. And if we need to each them at a point in time there, this is where it steps in. Particularly if they've tried something and it hasn't worked, that's when you start to go into the each model and get a full explanation of what's been happening with them. Only then can we go, and this is almost like the each within the GROW, the options piece, the options. What options have we got? And even if they give you the most ridiculous options and you think, so they say, oh, you know, you could send me off to a course. There's one going next week for $5,000 that you could pay for me. And you're going, what? You don't come back with don't be ridiculous or no, that's not going to work. Because as soon as you do that, you've stopped the conversation. Acknowledge everything. But there's a way of acknowledging. So they might say that and you go to them and say, oh, okay, that's one option. What's another option? So you can even count them on your fingers. Okay, that's one option. What's another option? Give me another option. And when they've given you something, this is where you start to find that they'll become realistic. Just keep going. Keep asking them, how many options? Are there any other options you could possibly think of that could work here? Because it's getting them again to take ownership. It's getting them again to give you more dialogue, and it keeps that dialogue between the two of you more open and more honest. So really explore lots of the options. The way we can link the final one, the will, into this, and I actually link them together, is by saying if they come up with an option, the will is about the next step. It's about their level of confidence, their level of competence to be able to move forward. So they may have given you an option. You need to check, do we have the skill? Do we have the will to be able to do that? And that might be this part about this, the moving forward to the next step. If we, for example, if we chose to send you off to, if we took the option that you've decided you want to take the team meeting next week, how comfortable are you feeling doing that? So you're bringing that will into one of the options there. That's what I mean by that. So you've got a clear line where their level of comfort is. What role would you like me to play in that? What can I do to help you feel more comfortable to be able to move forward? So that's the sort of stuff that we need to do when I'm talking about linking the options to the will. How confident are they? How ready are they to be able to take this to the next level? And also, as the manager, you need to be prepared to offer your support. It might be they need more resources. It might be they may need more training. It might be that they need more time, or they might need more exposure to what it is that they're not doing well. So we need to go through this step by step by step by step. It is a very simple model. It really is a simple model, but there's a definite art to doing it. And it's about really listening and asking good, solid questions, which leads me to the next bit, because a lot of people say to me, oh, yeah, that's okay, Ros, but what sort of questions do I ask? Basically, here they are. They've got to be the open questions. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. And avoid, very much avoid closed questions, because if you're using would, could, can, did, will, should, you're only ever going to get a yes, no from them. So you've got to open the dialogue with your open-ended questions. The other thing, leading questions, is like, so if I gave you more time, you'd be able to do this, wouldn't you? You're actually answering it for them. So think about your language. If you're guilty of putting those sorts of questions in there, that means you're leading the witness. You don't lead the witness when you're coaching. You actually ask them for their opinions, and you ask them to come up with their own solutions. That's what's important. Multiple questions. I've seen this time and time again where people say, well, when do you need to start doing that, and what other resources do you need, and who else needs to be involved in that? They don't know where to start. They've lost you at the beginning. They don't know what is the most important question. They don't know what they're supposed to answer. One question at a time, only one question at a time. And the general rule for all of this is the Pareto rule, the 80-20. You do 20% of the talking, they do 80% of the talking. If you find yourself talking equally, an equal amount of talking to them, you've got it wrong. If you're talking more than they are, you've got it wrong. Go back to questioning. Make your questions simple, really precise, and open. And you get good questioning techniques in, that's fine. If you truly go to the coaching level, which is a whole other level, which I would recommend for when you've got somebody that you're going to delegate to, high competence, high capability, high confidence, these people know how to do the job. They might even be better than you. There's one simple question that I only ever do ask when I'm really coaching someone, and that is, what would you like to talk about today? That's all I ever do for a coaching session. because the people know what they want to get through. They know the discussions they want to have. They know where their sticking points are. They know what they're not doing well, and they want to chat about it. You need to be the ears. You need to ask the questions. That's your only role in all of this, and it becomes effective. But then again, people still say, oh, but I'm only learning and I don't know how to do this. So here's some questions for you, which I can make available to you. There's a lot of them there. And look, I put them in because people always ask for them. I would not preempt any of these. If you're preempting these and you've got that list of questions, you're not allowing yourself to listen to what they're saying. You're only thinking of the next question you're going to ask them. This is not how you coach. It really isn't. They're great questions, but they should come out automatically. It's just a guideline for you. It's just an idea that these are the sorts of things that will make a really big difference when you start asking questions to people and really listening to them. That's what our challenge is. We need to start getting them to tell us, because we don't know what's going on in their mind. We can only assume. And when we assume, we've lost. We've absolutely lost straight away. So it's about thinking, what do I need to ask them? What do I need to listen to? What are they telling me? When they tell me something, I'm not going to let that go. I'm going to ask a question about it. Okay, you just said, what does that mean? That's the sort of thing that I'm talking about. Tell me more about that. What's important here? Where's that coming from? What's going on behind the scenes that I don't know about? So you've got to listen to what they're saying to be able to ask them a good question. Questioning is something that I think a lot of people get wrong, because they do that leading the witness style questioning. You've got to make them pure and simple. Fundamentally, the process of coaching is very, very simple. You cannot change another person, but I can change my approach. I can change me. I can change what I'm doing. I can change my method of encouraging my people to talk to me and coaching them to get to the next level and giving them good quality feedback. And when I do that, I can change the world. I can change my work environment and all the people in there, because they will want to, because I've created that engagement. So, folks, that's basically it in a nutshell. This is a really complex session to leave you on, because it's probably incredibly important on a one-on-one basis to give you to hear what your particular situations are, and I can work through those with you. But I've given you that framework, and if you give it a go, you will find that once you start to really use the technique as I've explained today, it creates magic, and it is a kind of magic. Over the past 12 months, we've covered a number of topics, and this one is aimed at bringing them all together. So I hope this stuff has given you a greater level of confidence, some new tools, some new techniques to be able to move forward and start using these tools that we've discussed. I'd like to again thank all of you for tuning in and making this possible. I'd like to thank Lindsay for making it as possible as well, and our wonderful, wonderful sponsors who we could never do this without if they hadn't been there. So Matronics, Pentair, Fluidra and Hayward. Without you, this wouldn't have been able to become a possibility. I've really enjoyed getting to know all of you. It's been great working with you. And if I've added value, then I'm very happy. And if you ever want to get in contact with me, please do. But that's the end of the session for today. Thank you, folks. And I hope you have a great day. Bye. And thank you for your comments too. I'm just reading them now. Thank you very, very much. It's been great. Thank you.